Welcome to Stampscaping 101. I thought I would get to some of the things that I talk about a lot in my videos, but I don't know if I've actually done it before. But one of the things that I talk about when describing lighting in scenes is that a lot of times when people are kind of getting the feel of color application in their scenes, okay, sometimes it's about kind of getting the feel of the application of inks, okay? So let's just get that started right now, and I'll talk about it as I go along here. But sometimes when people are learning this kind of process of laying down dye-based inks in particular. It could be other types of media too in describing lighting. But sometimes what they do, okay, I'm just adding in some antique linen here. It's a fairly light color from the distress line from Ranger and Tim Holtz. Okay, but when people are adding in tone, okay, and describing lighting, what I talk about is developing contrasts in my pieces, okay? So describing lighting is just the retention of lighter areas of a piece, okay? So if we're working on a white piece of cardstock, then it's the white of the paper, okay? So in here, I've left, like a streak of white in here, okay? And let's do the same thing in here. In waterfall scenes, I tend to like to leave an area of my water light, and then I also like to leave my falls light, okay? So I'm just going in here. By the way, I'm just using one of these little cotton rounds here. You can use whatever. You can use your whatever applicators you're used to applying your inks with. But right in here, what I have done is I've, you know, defined lighting. Okay, it's not, when you're doing pieces like this, it isn't so much about kind of figuring out the formula of, okay, what should be light and what should be dark. There's a little bit of that going on, but it's really more, I don't know, it's kind of areas. Like if I left, some area over here light on these rocks, and I made other rocks darker or whatever. That's not wrong, and this all could be filled in. We could have a light source that's off the page. It could be, you know, out of the composition too, and that's not wrong, okay? But it's just this isolation of light and dark. So we go dark, light, dark right there. Here it's kind of center focused in the darkness. I like to separate kind of light source and reflected light. The waterfalls aren't like a light source, but I like to divide up kind of my areas of light, as opposed to just one big one in the center. Now, I mean, sometimes you leave, an area of center lighting like this, but I would probably have some areas in here a little bit more blue, and I would keep, some of these areas out here a little bit lighter. But, the bottom line is just you just have some areas that are defined as light and areas that are defined as shadow, okay? And it really doesn't matter exactly where you put it. There could be more targeted areas if you're going to have some kind of little figure in your scene, like a fisherman or something like that. You probably want them to be able to be seen, so you keep them in a little area of light. All right, so here's what I'm getting at here, okay? Now, a lot of times people aren't used to, when they're first starting out, I'm talking about, just applying ink over certain things. They're used to coloring rocks, like, okay, I'm going to color that rock individually, and they're going on with, a marker and they're coloring like that, or several rocks, or something of that sort. And that's not wrong either. But what I've found is that, people get doing this like this, and, it could be a different type of coloring experience for them, okay? And then it doesn't take long. They get it within, I don't know, a few minutes, really. And then, okay, when they move on to their next colors, okay, we're going to add this. And I'm going to make these blue tones right here. I like that antique linen as kind of a warm first color, okay? But see, when I'm adding this in here like so, This is Mohawk Everyday Digital White Coated Silk. It's kind of like a, it's almost, it's like a matte paper, but it is coated to a degree, but it's much more matte than it is glossy. Um, okay, so see, this is what I would do filling in here, okay? Okay, so it's just using that um, next tone of blue. But here's what happens here, okay? Um, this is something that it just feels weird for me to do. But what happens is um, when people get the feel of this, quite oftentimes, okay, they over ink everything. Okay, okay, I got the idea down and we're filling in. Oh my gosh, I lost all my light in here, okay? So let's do that on both of these scenes. Let's say that I just got carried away, and I get this in my comments too. It's like, yeah, I didn't retain my light, you know, and I get it too, you know. It's um, they get, you know, they get in the flow of it, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but when it comes to lighting, if you want kind of a contrasting lit area, what you're going to have to do is you're just going to have to see right here. You just got to put on the brakes and not come into this area so much, you know, with the current color that you're working in. So in theory, what you do is you, um, as you move up your value scale, okay, into these darker tones like that, what you do is you just, if you're doing like in a streaky kind of application like I'm doing here, what you do is you just don't go in quite as far. Or if you're worried about that, let's say you had a super wet new, you know, dark blue pad or something like that, and you ink up, and there's a ton of ink on here, just blot it off a little bit, or it just makes shorter strokes, okay. And then as soon as it gets like dry on here, and you're applying less ink, then you know, just make a longer streak in here. Okay, but what I'm doing in this video is I want to show you what you do if you do go overboard and, you know, we lost all our light or something like that, okay? Because it happens. Okay, so let me just apply quite a bit of this in here. Okay, now one of the things for me is because I use that re-inker fluid on here, there was a lot of that antique linen that got applied. So this one's a little bit, you know, this one's not applying as smoothly as this one because this one was just wetter to begin with. Oh, this one's glossy right here. So that's a piece of glossy cardstock too. So that is that. But see, this on this, you know, this matte one, you know, you can apply very easily, okay? This kind of looks neat too, you know. Sometimes, you know, we don't want so much contrast, but I'm going to go really dark on these, okay? So we can show you exactly what you do if you get too dark, okay? Now, if we get too dark, we're not going to be employing some kind of like bleaching process or something like that. You know, you've seen that technique before. I don't see too many people doing the like the bleaching technique anymore. I don't know, do any of you do that? Um, I don't know, very, pretty cool process, but I'm going to show you just how to define light in kind of, you know, a darker surface here, okay? Now see how much darker this one is? This is using the same blue that I used on here, right? But this one was just so much more wet, you know, because I had just, you know, applied the antique linen on this one. So just go back in there, and as this one starts to set up, okay, and absorb into the paper and dry by evaporation, you can see, you know, I can get a lot darker, you know, with my current color. So if you can get darker using your current color, then do so before moving on to your next color, okay? And we're just going to be working up darker and darker. All right? So let's see. For me, it's kind of hard, you know, because I know too. It's muscle memory. I stop going in quite as far, but so it's kind of weird for me to be applying like tons more ink, like in the, you know, what would be the lighter area, especially over my waterfalls like this. It does change the mood though. Sometimes when you take out the white, okay, or scene, it's not as, you don't have that lighting anymore. It's much more of a muffled, kind of muted tone. And it's, I don't know, I think the scene looks, doesn't it look quieter like this, than to have, so much contrast. So I like that, but let's try to make it where it's not, maybe not desirable. you know, it's just way too dark overall. Okay, now this is starting to dry on me a little bit. Now, one of the things that I mentioned before in previous videos is if things, I talked about the benefits of re-inkers, and if things start to get a little bit dry, and my inks are drying reasonably quick this morning, just go back in with, another re-inker. You can go back in with the antique linen or something like that, and just re-moisten the whole thing, okay? Now, I'm just applying it over the whole thing because, I'm trying to not have, a strong light source right now, okay? But otherwise, you would just be applying it, okay? On the perimeter where you're going to be applying your darker tones, okay? So I've kind of re-moistened the surface as well as the pulp of the paper, okay? So like I said, we're having evaporation happen as I blab on here, okay? All right, Danube Blue. This is and this is applied to any inks, any color schemes that we're working in, any brands of inks, okay? This is not brand specific here. Okay, so I'm just applying this all over the entire thing right here. I'm trying to get rid of that lighter area in here especially, okay? All right. Okay, so that is that. Danube Blue. So, definitely getting into at least a medium tone blue here. It looks quite a bit darker, but I don't know. I find that blue is not... that color, I don't know, it doesn't seem too indicative of the color in the pad. It's a few shades lighter, I think. Values lighter. Okay, so going in like that. All right. So okay, so this is a far cry from white, right? In here. Now we didn't retain very much of a change in or transition in values. Let me see right here. I just happen to have this one. But this is your change of values. Pretty much using the same tones I just used. Okay, so I would normally have this type of thing going on in the sky right here, or down in the water down below, okay? It's transition, dark, medium, or dark, medium, light right here, and then white. Okay, not in everything, but usually if I like to use white pigment ink, as like little, like a frost or, fog in my scenes, then I have to retain some of the white of the paper, all right, to apply white ink as mist, okay? Because if you retain the white of the paper, you're saying that kind of white light is hitting your scene somewhere, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so that is that, all right? Okay, now, how do we make something lighter in here, okay? It's like one of those trick questions. You might say, okay, let's play, we can add some white pigment ink in here or something like that. Okay, now you could do something like that. Or a bleaching technique, or like a watercolor type of, technique where you take some water on a paintbrush and you start, adding it into your, your water reactive dyes. What you could do too, these are dye-based inks and water-based, dye-based inks are water-based. Okay, but here's the thing. How do you make something lighter? You can also make something lighter by making something next to it darker, okay? You're not physically making something lighter, but what we're dealing with in, when we're working on a white piece of paper, we're dealing with contrasts, okay? This piece of paper right here, is this light next to this? No, it's the same. But is this light next to this? Yes, it is, because it is by contrast here, okay? So, and then instead of having to do something like a subtractive process or something of that sort, let's move into some darker colors, okay? Now, I don't have darker colors in other brands, so I'm just going to go with my Marvies, okay? And we'll see if this goes darker. And then we'll also use black here to kind of make, we'll take it as far as we can in order to create that contrast, okay? So this doesn't look as dark as that Memento Danube blue, but sometimes it can be, okay? So let's go ahead with this right here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that transitioning value scale in here, okay? Yeah, see that blue right there? See how much, it's not a huge amount darker, okay? But it is darker than whatever we've had on there so far, okay? And I'll kind of just leave it a little bit streaky, but I will be employing these streaks kind of strategically. All right. Okay, now, I mean, we didn't suddenly just define light. I guess we can see the semblance of it, okay, here. You see this where, there's these kind of slightly lighter areas. I've kind of put a streak across there. And down in here, I'll add a little bit more in the shadows of these rocks, okay. Right and left corners, okay. Like that. I like to create a nice strong vignette, okay. So see that right there? I mean, that's area there. I mean, it's still the color that it was, but we'll see that transform from a perception standpoint, okay? It's not transforming physically to a lighter tone, but we'll see if our perceptions change as a result of contrast, okay? All right, so adding this one, I'm adding it, kind of around my rocks, and like I said, lower right and left corners here. It's just the easiest way to create contrast and framing. Just using colors. You can use, objects with that, branches or whatever, too. But let's just go with contrast here. Okay, now I've made my water really dark. Now sometimes that's what a lot of people tend to do a lot of times when they're thinking about waterfalls. They're thinking water is blue, okay? But if you look at a waterfall, that churning water is more white, okay, than, blue, okay? And water is not blue during like a sunset either. It's, water tends to be really reflective and kind of mimics what's going on in its surrounding areas. So if you have like a, I don't know, lake surface, ocean surface, or something like that, any type of body of water during sunset, it's probably more, the colors of the sunset, whatever those are, sunrise, whatever you have. Okay, so here's this medium tone blue that I'm working with. Marvy calls it light blue, but it's, it's a little bit more, I don't know, like a 35% blue probably, something of that sort. Trying to get a little bit darker here using my existing color. I'm using the same applicator here, so it had a lot of the lighter tone in there. Now it's more of just pure light blue here, okay. Okay, so anyways, that is that. But do we see this starting to come about in terms of being a lighter shade? And I mean, we've just taken it, we've barely taken it darker with this one, okay. We're just kind of taking it, very incrementally, you might say. We don't have to, move through 10 different blues or something like that. We're just, we're going through 2 extra blues and then black, okay. Okay, so we're moving into this blue right here. It's a Prussian blue. It's fairly dark in terms of any blues that are out there on the market. Doesn't have to be that one, there's like Blueprint Sketch from Distress, if you have that one. I don't know, there's a number of tones like this. This Mermaid Lagoon was real similar to that number 10 light blue Marvy. Okay, but see this one right here? Look how much lighter that is starting to look. See, just by putting that out there, that looks much lighter now by contrast, okay? So see, you can still have light in your pieces, okay? Even though, I mean, that's, it was like this. That doesn't look light. That still looks really dark in there, right? okay? But this is how using contrast can change one's perception, okay? The darker you make an area out here, whatever you retain that's lighter than it seems one step lighter, again by contrast, okay? So you're kind of moving two different things, not physically, but by perception, all right? Now, when I move into this darker tone, I don't want to fill the whole thing in, again, if I want to kind of define lighting, okay? All right, when you're applying dye-based inks on things like that, you can kind of streak it in there to get a certain type of look, right? But if you really want to build up some of that tone, you have to kind of dab like this to build up little beads of ink. A little bit more, okay? So see this left and right corner right here? But look at what's happening. This, I mean, it looked, I don't know, like twilight or something like that, way after, you know, the sun has set, okay? But look at this one right here. It's almost looking more and more daytime. And not because of the perimeter, but I'm talking about this lighting in here. But look how much lighter this looks, again, by contrast to this one, okay? This looks really late, but now this is getting, I don't know, to me it's looking earlier, the darker I go with the retention of some of that light. So let's do that same type of concept here on this one, okay? Look at that, how that is really lighting up, okay? And again, this is just an example of this. I mean, you don't have to go as dark as I'm going, okay? I was just using, you're just going darker than whatever your existing surface is, okay? I went pretty dark on this piece, you know, using those different shades of blue. Okay, so see this right here? Really building it up right here. Look at that. Start to really illuminate, okay? Okay, let's really try to get some of this Prussian blue going to illuminate my rocks right in here. I mean, illuminate the water, not the rocks. I'm darkening the rocks. All right, so see that? One step darker here, one step lighter there. Or whatever, one value lighter by perception, okay? All right. That is that. Let's see. Glossy and matte, okay, or satin. All right, see that lighting's really starting to be defined here very strongly. And we haven't even gotten to black yet, so we'll go to black right now, and you'll see this really come about, okay? In terms of the perceived lighting, okay? So see that, I mean, now if I toned everything out in black, there's not very much way to go. Then you have to go with the white pigment ink or something like that. But you can go pretty dark on your pieces and still have this notion of really strong lighting, okay? By just utilizing those darker tones, that we have at our disposal. Okay, bottom left and right corners. That kind of frames things off from a vignette kind of standpoint, or a vignette structure. Okay, see that right there? Adding it onto some of these rocks right here. My black pad seems a little bit dry, I think. Let's see. Yeah, it's not too bad. I'm getting used to these little cotton rounds. These cotton rounds are just kind of an experiment. I don't know. I find them as easy to use as anything else, or as good to use, maybe. It is kind of getting shredded, but, I like the density of them. I don't know if I like them more than paper towels, but I don't know, it's just something different. Okay, so left and right upper corners, like so, dabbing, see that nice dark um, corner right there. Starts to really bring this area to life, okay? Now there's other things we can do to make this look even lighter. I can have an overhanging tree limb in there that's, done in black on the white coated silk paper. We can do it in VersaFine Clair, super, super dark black, pigment ink. And that will make that area stand out even more by contrast, by having a dark object across it or over it. Whatever, but this is just using tone, okay, and color. But look at this area in here. I mean, that looks, it's still kind of, it's not high noon or something like that, unless high noon is a super, super, foggy day with, maybe a solar eclipse or something like that going on. But it looks much lighter, again, by contrast. Okay, let's employ the same value in here with this one. I like the look of these, by the way. And it's kind of in me to, really, I don't know, retain some of the lighter areas, just to really stretch your contrast going from dark, to something really light, which is, like a 1%, which would be like the white of the paper, okay? But you don't have to have that type of value scale. You can have it, I don't know what color that is, maybe, or value that is, maybe 30% right in there, something like that. Down here, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's 20. So we're going from like 20 to 90. I don't know if, well, I guess the black of the impressions you can consider like 100% black almost. Maybe 97 or something like that. If you use the VersaFine Clair, it's like, oh my god, that is so dark. Don't use the VersaFine Clair though on glossy cardstock. I don't think it's going to dry. Okay. So this is the black here. Let's try to go real dark blacks, just so we have quite a big contrast, and we'll make that area look much, much lighter. Okay. Try to make those waterfalls, the water, churning water with all that oxygen in it, stand out really strong here. Okay. All right. All right. Look at that. It's like a little kind of hidden midnight cove or something like that. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like, more moonlight to me because it's blue, certainly than sunlight. All right. See that right there? We have our lighting in here now, right? Look at that. I would say that's pretty well illuminated. It almost looks like it's glowing. It looks like glow in the dark, because it's a blue light, right? Instead of being white light in there. Okay? But anyways, we have our contrast in here. Now we have our scenic lighting taking place, okay? Want to have a little bit of fun on this one right here? Let's see what this looks like with a little bit of the, or a lot of the bleed-proof light. I'd say a little bit of it, I don't want to splatter this everywhere. But let's take a look and see what this looks like. We'll have some sparkly little light in here. I usually like it to blend in a little bit more by the retention of some white from the paper, but let's take a look and see what it looks like. Over kind of more of a, at its lightest, a medium tone, light, lit composition, okay? So on this one right here, maybe they're just some stars. I don't know. I might get it over some of my trees. I don't know. Try not to do too much, though. Okay, so see this right here? Little stars up there. I'm being careful not to splatter all around. If you put it in front of the trees, it just looks like snowfall or something like that, which wouldn't be bad. Okay, but not too bad. I mean, that's a lot of lighting in here, right? So see what I mean? There's not a point of no return. Like I said, if I take it all black and we can't see anything, but who's going to do that? Okay, and don't say you. That one just wouldn't be. Okay, now here, I'm just kind of adding some little sparkly little light. You really wouldn't see this like this, but, you know, who cares, you know? This is art. We're not necessarily trying to replicate what you can do with a camera so much better. Um, which came up one time. I mentioned that to someone, but that's something that was always mentioned to us art students because we get caught up in that kind of notion of, well, wait a minute, you know, would that exist? No, you know, it's, you know, artistic freedom and whatnot. Okay, so anyways, I'm wiping off some of these larger ones in here. Okay, but this is just a little bit of a kind of splashing, you know, lighting in there. And it doesn't look too bad. Like I said, I wiped off some of those larger splashes though, but and it kind of puts a little bit of extra texture in there, like so. Okay, so there you have it. At no point in time is there a point of no return. You have some really kind of rough kind of applications of ink, perhaps, in there, you know, where things have don't look, you know, very smooth or whatever. Just go back in and add more of your base coat down like that, and then add more tone over the top of it. You know, have too much of a kind of a obtrusive mark in your lit area. Like I said, go back to your lighter tones and add that down there. Okay. A lot of times when people, like if you get like a rough mark with a dark color or something like that, I can't do it right now because I already applied my bleed proof white, but you know, you get, you know, some sort of mark like, you know, that, and it's right in here. Don't try to just blend it out with, you know, your existing color. What you do is you bring up the background colors, go back in with your lighter tones, you know, and blend some of these in there, bringing the background contrast a little bit higher. And then, you know, you'll get some benefit of some extra layers of colors in there, you know, to make everything look richer. But then just utilize your darker tones on the perimeter like that again. If you know, we've gone really dark in here to try to cover something up, okay? Then just go even darker, you know, and it could just be, you know, the four corners or something like that, but usually it's kind of coming in from those corners like that, or wherever it might be, and you can kind of smooth things out. And, you know, I haven't seen scenes that have gone awry, okay? The scenes that people don't like tend to be, it's 99% of the time, it's ones that people just haven't finished off. You know, they can add more color, add more imagery, employ different types of textures, you know, with something like this. You know, there's paint pens, and one of my favorite things that I do, not to cover things up, but to enhance, but it can also obscure kind of the things that you don't want, is just some white pigment ink, you know, applied with a cotton ball, okay, in the form of fog or whatever. But just your coloring alone and lighting, you know, just work with it. Apply more inks or whatever. Does it look muddy sometimes? It can. And I get that on my own pieces all the time. Especially, I get a lot when I'm using a lot of greens and grasses. I can't see kind of the definition of some of my grass forms anymore. You know, oftentimes my grass forms are very delicate, okay? So I might stamp them out with black or something like that. And then I start applying tone in there and I lose some of that changing kind of terrain texture. But that's where things like if your grass is green, you can utilize paint pens or something like that in there. Or you just stamp something very crisp over something that's, you know, kind of more muddled and less defined. And then you have contrast playing against one another. You have sharp and muddled. Okay, so muddled suddenly isn't some kind of undesirable trait of the piece. It becomes a contrasting texture with your sharper imagery, leading to kind of a more, I don't know, well-rounded, a wider ranging textural statement in that area that you utilize those two things in. So all kinds of things like that. This also is a sharp kind of detail in our pieces. It's a very crisp little dot, you know. Even the smallest ones in here, you can do the same thing, you know, with a paint pen. You can't get as small as you can, you know, with the bleed-proof white and splatter painting, but you can do all kinds of things like that. So, all right, that being said, if you ever get anything, don't toss it away. If you just can't figure it out, can't figure out the lock and key for figuring out those pieces, mail them to me and I'll finish them off, and you'll see just how utilization of these different types of processes and I don't know, concepts too come into play, and then you'll be able to employ them on your own scene should you come up with the same types of kind of hurdles in the finishing off of your completed pieces. Okay, so anyways, hope that comes in handy. Thanks so much for watching, and thanks as always for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.